Hello, my name's Chris from the Mad Better channel. Welcome to another video. In this video, the fifth in my series on Lightroom Classic masking, we're going to be looking at sky masks and ways we might improve them. Sky masks are of course AI based and you have no options when creating them. You simply click the button and Lightroom does its thing. So let's look at this image. Shift and W to go into masking. This is the famous Radcliffe camera in Oxford. So to create a sky mask, click on Sky Mask and select Sky. And Lightroom will do its thing. And there's our sky mask. You can see it's clearly selected some of the foreground and a bit of the roof here. In fact, it's easier if you switch from color overlay to white on black. You can quite clearly see that it's selected a fair bit below the horizon as well as some of this roof here. Now there are various things we could do. We could add a linear gradient to try and match it to the horizon and get a brush to do that. But as people have been showing on the internet, there is another trick, which is to intersect the sky mask with itself. So we hold down the Alt key, click intersect and select sky, and you'll see here's the second sky, which is an intersect, and it's done a better job. It's eliminated some of the selection below the horizon and made a better job of the ceiling of this building. But you can see it's also begun to lose some of the selection in the sky itself. But that's one trick. Now you might think if you keep doing intersect several times you could actually select all of this. Well, let me turn that off and we'll go back to mask 1 and turn that on. This is one where I've intersected sky with itself 4 times. And now you see it has actually made a much better job of the horizon, but it's also lost a fair bit of the actual sky itself. So multiple intersect skies doesn't normally give that good an answer. So intersecting once or twice is probably best depending on the image. So, how does this intersecting mask trick work? Some people have hinted that it's a mystery. In fact, it is quite simple to explain, and if you understand it, then you can work out other ways to use intersecting masks to your advantage. If you watch my previous video in this series, you will understand exactly what intersecting masks does. But essentially, intersecting two masks leaves you with a mask comprising the common areas of both the underlying masks. So it follows as a matter of principle that intersecting two masks will always result in a smaller masked area. Well, okay, if you intersect two identical masks, the resulting masks will be the same. So intersecting masks can only reduce the masked area, it cannot increase it. So if we go back to this image and the sky mask, you can see it has selected a fair bit below the horizon and only partially selected some of the sky. So when you intersect this sky mask with another sky mask, Lightroom will generate the second sky mask, which will have a slightly different area masked both in the sky and below the horizon. So the intersection will reduce the areas below the horizon which are masked, thus improving the quality of the sky mask overall. Sadly, the opposite is true of the area of the sky, which will also suffer a reduction of the areas masked to the common areas of the two underlying sky masks. This makes the area of the sky masked to be less good in quality, as you could see from the 4 times intersection mask example we've already looked at. So what else could we try to improve this mask? Well, one approach would be to use another AI mask by subtracting an object mask. So subtract object. We're using the rectangle tool and we'll first of all go around this raised roof here. There we are, it's eliminated that from the mask, which is a big improvement. And it's also worth trying the horizon to see if we could get that with an object mask. So subtract object, we'll go along the horizon like this and see what that produces. Well, that's not done a bad job. It's missed a bit here, but it has improved the overall mask. You could go in with a brush or try another object, subtract here, and we haven't had too much effect on the sky. The final tip to try and improve this sky mask on this particular image is to use a brush to add back these parts of the sky which are partially not masked. So add brush. We don't particularly want much of a feather. It's important you have auto mask selected, so that as long as you keep the plus in the middle of the brush inside the sky area, it shouldn't affect too much of this stuff below the horizon, because that's a different colour and luminance. So we go along here. As I say, trying to keep that plus in the sky and away from right next to the edge. So I could spend a bit more time getting a better edge going into these bits with a smaller brush, but you get the idea, and that looks a pretty good sky mask to me. In practice, when you make an adjustment, I doubt you'll notice any of these imperfections in the sky mask. That looks pretty good. So there's some tips on how to improve a sky mask with a fairly hard edge like this. Now let's switch to an image which has trees and branches and leaves on the edge of the sky. So let's consider this image, which you can see has a lot of trees and bushes on the horizon with the sky poking through gaps in the branches. So I've already created a sky mask, and as you can see, a lot of this area down here has not been selected. So the first thing we can try is to intersect with another sky mask. So hold down the Alt key, intersect, select sky. In fact, that's probably made it worse, so we'll turn that off. What we do need to do is to deal with the chimney. So we'll go subtract, object, use the rectangle tool. So that's cleared up the chimney, taking it out of the sky mask. So how can we add these bits of sky in the trees back into the mask? Well, with a sky mask, I think the software relies on pattern recognition, as demonstrated by a tip I gave you in an earlier video, whereby if you flip an image vertically, you can trick the software into thinking that foreground water is the sky. But if we could give it an easier decision to make, then we might get a better result. And one obvious way is to use a color range mask. So all the software has to do is decide if any of the pixels in this area are the same color as the pixels I pick in the color range. So we want to add color range, and then we'll click here in the sky. Now unfortunately that's selected a lot of the foreground, so we'll see if we can, see, once you get it off the foreground you start losing it in the sky again. But we could deal with that by subtracting a linear gradient. So subtract linear gradient. And there's our mask. It's much better in this area here. So if we now make an adjustment, I'll make it over the top so that you can clearly see. So we'll reduce the exposure a bit. We'll cool it down and we'll add a bit of dehaze. So that's not a bad result. So if we turn it off, turn it back on, we see we get some of the sky, or a lot of the sky here, is covered within the mask. But to demonstrate how flexible all these masking arrangements are, I've gone back and deleted the color range and the linear gradients, and we'll try another approach. So what we could do is paint in all these areas with a brush, but that will of course include all the branches, but then we can take them off by deducting a luminance range mask, and that might also help with some of these scaffolding poles. So we start by adding a brush, painting the areas that haven't been fully captured. We don't need to worry about being too accurate because we'll eliminate all these overlaps on dark areas via the luminance range mask. So we add all this in. Okay, so now we go subtract luminance range. What we want to capture are all the darker tones, so we don't want to capture the lighter tones. That's probably about right. We'll have a look at this on white on black. I should have been a bit more careful up here, but you can see we've now captured all the bits of the sky in the between the branches. So we'll turn off the overlay, go back to the main mask, and that's without and that's with. You see we've got all the sky here, and in fact I think that's probably a better result than the previous one using a colour range add mask. So this just shows how flexible these masks are and the different ways you can combine them, and it's just a question of choosing the one that works best on any particular image. And now one final way you might improve a sky mask. As you know, there are no parameters with a sky mask. You get what you get. And quite often on an image such as this you get a very harsh line, particularly if you make fairly heavy adjustments. So you might want to in effect feather the edge of the mask and indeed graduate it. So I'll demonstrate that here by creating a sky mask. And you'll see it's missed, or rather it's selected some of the foreground. So our first step will be to hold Alt, intersect, select sky, and that's much improved the horizon here. So now we'll switch off the overlay, and I'll make what is a fairly over the top adjustment just so we can demonstrate the points, and we'll add a bit of dehaze. Now that to me looks unnatural with this very sharp line here. So what we want to do, we'll show the overlay. And now in order to feather the edge and to graduate the mask, what we'll do, we'll subtract a linear gradient. Hold shift to constrain it to vertical and pull up. Now, as you know, if you've looked at the earlier videos, with a linear gradient below this line you get 100% of the adjustment, then 100 to 50, then down to 0, and above that line there's no adjustment. So what we don't want is for this line here, the 100%, to go above the horizon. So we'll lift this up to it's just below the horizon, and then we can lift this up. So on the horizon you're eliminating most of the effects gradually down to 0. So now if we turn off the overlay, that's the result. If we toggle the linear grades on and off, that just looks really false. That looks much more natural, and that's the overall effect. So that's how you can both feather and graduate the effect of a sky mask. So hopefully you found this useful and have gained something you might use in your own editing. If you did, perhaps you give the video a like and consider subscribing. But in the meantime, many thanks for watching.